Welcome back to True Crime XX. Today, we're unraveling some of the most mysterious unsolved cases. Get ready for stories that will keep you on the edge of your seat. Let's dive in. At the center of this sordid case was Marilyn Frost, 52-year-old divorcee whose life seemed to embody the very essence of Palm Beach excess. Marilyn had made her fortune through a series of shrewd investments and a high-profile divorce from tech mogul Harold Frost. With her platinum blonde hair, designer wardrobe, and penchant for flashy jewelry, Marilyn was a fixture in Palm Beach's social scene. But behind the facade of wealth and glamour, Marilyn harbored a deep-seated loneliness and an insatiable need for attention and affection. Her children, now grown and living their own lives, rarely visited. Her friends, if they could be called that, were more interested in her money and status than in forming genuine connections. Marilyn's life, where all its apparent luxury was achingly empty. Enter Jackson Torres, a 24-year-old aspiring model and personal trainer. With his chiseled physique, sun-kissed skin, and dazzling smile, Jackson was the embodiment of youthful vitality and charm. He had come to Palm Beach with dreams of making it big, but found himself struggling to make ends meet in a town where appearance was everything. Competition was fierce. Their paths crossed at the Breakers Palm Beach, a historic luxury resort where Marilyn was a regular at the spa, and Jackson had recently started working as a fitness instructor. From the moment Marilyn laid eyes on Jackson, she was captivated. Here was someone who could fill the void in her life, someone who could make her feel young and desirable again. For Jackson, Marilyn represented an opportunity. He saw in her not just a wealthy older woman, but a chance to finally break into the world of luxury and privilege he had always dreamed of. When Marilyn began showering him with gifts and attention, Jackson was all too happy to reciprocate, even if his feelings were more motivated by ambition than genuine affection. Their relationship quickly intensified. Marilyn lavished Jackson with expensive gifts, designer clothes, a luxury car, even a small yacht. She took him on exotic vacations to the Maldives, Paris, and the Swiss Alps. For a time, it seemed like a mutually beneficial arrangement. Marilyn got the companionship and excitement she craved, while Jackson enjoyed a lifestyle he could never have afforded on his own. But as the months wore on, the dynamics of their relationship began to shift. Marilyn's affection turned to obsession. She demanded more and more of Jackson's time, growing jealous of his interactions with other women, even his female clients at the gym. She began tracking his movements, installing a GPS device in the car she had bought him, and demanding constant updates on his whereabouts. Jackson, for his part, began to feel trapped. The lavish lifestyle that had once seemed so appealing now felt like a gilded cage. He longed for the freedom to pursue his own dreams, to build genuine relationships with people his own age. But every time he tried to create some distance, Marilyn would reel him back in with tears, threats, or promises of even greater rewards. The situation came to a head in the summer of 2022. Jackson had met a young woman named Sophia at a local beach club. For the first time since he'd become involved with Marilyn, felt a genuine connection with someone. Sophia was kind, funny, and shared his passion for fitness and healthy living. They began seeing each other in secret, stealing moments together whenever Jackson could slip away from Marilyn's watchful eye. But Marilyn was not so easily fooled. She hired a private investigator who quickly uncovered Jackson's secret relationship. The revelation sent Marilyn into a spiral of rage and despair. She confronted Jackson, alternating between tearful pleas and vicious threats. She promised to ruin him, to ensure he would never work in Palm Beach again if he left her. Jackson, pushed to his breaking point, finally stood up to Marilyn, told her he was leaving, that their relationship was over, and that he wanted to pursue a life of his own. It was a moment of bravery and defiance that would ultimately seal his fate. On the night of July 15, 2022, Marilyn invited Jackson to her sprawling mansion on South Ocean Boulevard for what she claimed would be a farewell dinner. Jackson, hoping to end things amicably, agreed to attend. It would be the last decision he ever made. What happened that night would only be pieced together later through forensic evidence and Marilyn's own confused confessions. Jackson arrived at the mansion around 8 p.m., dressed casually in jeans and a white t-shirt. Marilyn greeted him with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, ushering him into the opulent dining room where a lavish meal had been prepared. As they ate, Marilyn plied Jackson with expensive wine, encouraging him to drink more and more. Her own glass, unbeknownst to Jackson, remained untouched. As the evening wore on and Jackson's inhibitions lowered, Marilyn began to press him about their relationship, begging him to reconsider his decision to leave her. Jackson, emboldened by the alcohol and his newfound resolve, stood firm, told Marilyn that while he cared for her, couldn't continue living a lie. He spoke of his feelings for Sophia, of his desire to build a life based on genuine love rather than financial dependence. Marilyn's reaction was swift and violent. In a rage, she grabbed a heavy crystal decanter from the table and struck Jackson across the temple. The force of the blow sent him crashing to the floor, where he lay stunned and bleeding. What followed was a frenzy of violence that would shock even the most hardened investigators. Marilyn, consumed by a murderous rage, continued to attack Jackson with whatever objects she could lay her hands on. Candlestick, letter opener, even her bare hands. All became instruments of destruction as she unleashed years of pent-up frustration and possessiveness on the young man who had dared to reject her. By the time Marilyn's fury subsided, Jackson lay motionless on the expensive Persian rug, his once handsome features now a mangled mess of blood and bruises. The dining room, with its elegant furnishings and priceless artwork, had been transformed into a scene of unimaginable horror. As the reality of what she had done began to sink in, Marilyn's mind raced with panic and confusion. She knew she needed to cover up her crime, find a way to dispose of Jackson's body, and erase all evidence of his presence in her home. The task seemed insurmountable, and in her distressed state, Marilyn was incapable of formulating a coherent plan. In a move that would later be described by prosecutors as both gruesome and pathetic, Marilyn attempted to dismember Jackson's body using various kitchen implements. The process was messy and inefficient, and Marilyn soon abandoned it, leaving Jackson's partially mutilated corpse on the blood-soaked rug. Exhausted, blood-stained, and in a state of shock, Marilyn retreated to her bedroom. There, she swallowed a handful of sleeping pills, hoping to escape the nightmare she had created, if only for a few hours. It was the housekeeper, Maria Gonzalez, who discovered the gruesome scene the next morning. Maria had worked for Marilyn for years, turning a blind eye to her employer's eccentricities and excesses. But nothing could have prepared her for the carnage she encountered in the dining room. Maria's screams alerted the security guard stationed at the property's gate. He rushed to the house, took one look at the bloody tableau, and immediately called 911. Within minutes, the quiet, exclusive neighborhood was swarming with police cars, ambulances, and crime scene investigators. Detective Sarah Chen of the Palm Beach Police Department was among the first to arrive on the scene. A veteran of the force with over 15 years of experience, Detective Chen thought she had seen it all. But the level of violence displayed in Marilyn Frost's dining room shook even her hardened sensibilities. As the crime scene technicians began their meticulous work, photographing and collecting evidence, Detective Chen turned her attention to Marilyn. She found the older woman in her bedroom, barely conscious and covered in dried blood. Marilyn was immediately taken into custody and transported to a local hospital for evaluation. The investigation that followed would captivate the nation, dominating headlines and sparking intense debate about wealth, power, and the dark undercurrents of Palm Beach society. As details of Marilyn and Jackson's relationship came to light, the public was both fascinated and horrified by the tale of obsession and murder in paradise. Marilyn Frost's arrest sent shockwaves through Palm Beach's elite social circle. Many who had rubbed shoulders with her at charity galas and exclusive clubs now rushed to distance themselves, claiming they had always sensed something off about the flamboyant divorcee. Others, perhaps recognizing something of themselves in Marilyn's desperate quest for youth and relevance, remained conspicuously silent. As the investigation progressed, a clearer picture of Marilyn and Jackson's relationship emerged. Interviews with friends, acquaintances, and employees painted a portrait of a deeply unbalanced dynamic, one fueled by Marilyn's insecurities and Jackson's ambition. Jackson's family, devastated by his brutal murder, spoke of a kind and ambitious young man who had simply wanted to make a better life for himself. His mother, Elena Torres, tearfully recounted how Jackson had sent money home to help support his younger siblings, never revealing the true source of his newfound wealth. Sophia, the young woman Jackson had been seeing in secret, was questioned extensively by the police. She provided crucial information about Jackson's state of mind in the days leading up to his murder, describing his increasing fear of Marilyn and his desire to break free from her control. As the case against Marilyn Frost built, her defense team worked tirelessly to craft a narrative that might save her from a life sentence. They pointed to her history of mental health issues, her allegedly abusive marriage to Harold Frost, and the pressure of maintaining her status in Palm Beach's competitive social scene. They argued that Marilyn had suffered a psychotic break, that she was not in her right mind when she killed Jackson. But the prosecution, led by the formidable state attorney Vanessa Reeves, painted a different picture. They portrayed Marilyn as a calculating predator who had deliberately targeted a vulnerable young man, exploiting him for her own gratification, and then brutally murdering him when she could no longer control him. The evidence, they argued, pointed not to a momentary lapse in sanity, but to a premeditated act of violence born out of jealousy and possessiveness. The trial, when it finally began in the spring of 2023, was a media sensation. Journalists from around the world descended on the Palm Beach County Courthouse, eager to capture every sordid detail of the case. Inside the courtroom, the atmosphere was tense and emotionally charged as witnesses recounted the events leading up to Jackson's murder. Perhaps the most damning testimony came from Dr. Elizabeth Harmon, a psychiatrist who had evaluated Marilyn following her arrest. Dr. Harmon described a woman consumed by narcissism and a pathological need for control. While she acknowledged that Marilyn suffered from various mental health issues, Dr. Harmon was firm in her assertion that Marilyn had been fully aware of her actions on the night of the murder. As the trial progressed, the true extent of Marilyn's obsession with Jackson became clear. Evidence was presented showing how she had manipulated and isolated the young man, slowly eroding his independence and self-esteem. Financial records revealed the staggering sums Marilyn had spent on Jackson, from extravagant gifts to plastic surgery procedures designed to maintain his youthful appearance. Perhaps most chilling were the journals discovered in Marilyn's home office. In page after page of fevered writing, Marilyn detailed her possessive love for Jackson, her paranoid fears of losing him, and her growing resentment of his desire for independence. The final entry, dated the day of the murder, contained the ominous line, "I can't have him. No one will." As the prosecution built its case, the defense team struggled to counter the mountain of evidence against their client. Their attempts to portray Marilyn as a victim of her own mental illness fell flat in the face of her calculated actions and the brutality of the crime. In a surprising turn of events, Marilyn herself took the stand in her own defense. Her appearance was a far cry from the glamorous socialite Palm Beach had known. Gone were the designer clothes and carefully maintained appearance, placed by a prison jumpsuit and a haggard, haunted look. Marilyn's testimony was rambling and often incoherent. She alternated between expressing remorse for Jackson's death and justifying her action, claiming that she had loved him more than anyone else ever could. Her performance on the stand did little to sway the jury, and may have actually damaged her case further. After weeks of testimony and mountains of evidence, the case finally went to the jury. It took them less than 6 hours to reach a verdict. Guilty of first-degree murder. The courtroom erupted in a mix of emotions as the verdict was read. Jackson's family wept with relief, while Marilyn sat stone-faced, her world crumbling around her. At the sentencing hearing, Judge Marcus Alvarado did not mince words. He described the murder as one of the most heinous crimes he had encountered in his long career, citing the calculated nature of Marilyn's actions and her complete lack of remorse. Marilyn Frost was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. As Marilyn was led away in handcuffs, the case that had captivated Palm Beach and the nation came to a close. But the repercussions of her actions would continue to ripple through the community for years to come. The murder of Jackson Torres forced Palm Beach to confront some uncomfortable truths about its culture of wealth and privilege. It sparked conversations about power dynamics in relationships, the exploitation of young people in the name of status and appearance, and the often overlooked mental health issues plaguing the seemingly perfect lives of the ultra-rich. For Jackson's family, the verdict brought a measure of justice, but could never erase the pain, their loss. Elena Torres established a foundation in her son's name, dedicated to helping young people escape exploitative relationships and build independent lives. Sophia, the young woman who had briefly known the real Jackson, struggled with guilt and grief. She eventually left Palm Beach, unable to shake the memories of what had happened. In time, she would become an advocate for victims of domestic violence, using her experience to help others recognize the signs of controlling and abusive relationships. And what of Marilyn Frost? Behind the walls of the Lowell Correctional Institution, she was just another inmate, with designer clothes and social status meaningless in the harsh reality of prison life. Some said she had finally found religion, spending her days reading the Bible and begging for forgiveness. Others whispered that she remained unrepentant, still obsessing over Jackson and plotting her revenge on a world that had rejected her. Truth, perhaps, lay somewhere in between. Marilyn Frost, like the case that made her infamous, defied easy categorization. She was at once a victim and a perpetrator. Cautionary tale of the corrosive effects of wealth and the dangers of unchecked obsession. As Palm Beach slowly returned to normal, the memory of Marilyn Frost and Jackson Torres lingered like a shadow over its sun-drenched street. It was a reminder that even in paradise, darkness can take root, and that the price of obsession can be paid not just in dollars, but in blood. The case of the crazy sugar mommy would go down in history as one of Palm Beach's most shocking crimes. A tale of love, wealth, and murder that exposed the dark underbelly of a world most could only dream of. It served as a grim reminder that behind the glittering facades and perfectly manicured lawns, human nature, with all its flaws and fatal obsessions, remains unchanged, waiting for the right circumstances to reveal its most terrible aspect. As years passed, the case of Marilyn and Jackson became something of a local legend, whispered about at cocktail parties and recounted to wide-eyed tourists. It became a part of Palm Beach's complex tapestry, a dark thread woven through its history of glamour and excess. And on quiet nights, when the ocean breeze rustles through the palm trees and the moon casts long shadows across the sand, some swear they can still hear the echoes of that fateful night, when a wealthy woman's obsession turned deadly, ever changing the face of Palm Beach. In the years following Marilyn Frost's conviction, Palm Beach struggled to reconcile its image as a playground for the wealthy with the dark reality exposed by the case. Community's response was mixed, with some calling for greater awareness of mental health issues and predatory relationships, while others preferred to sweep the incident under the rug and move on. The case had far-reaching implications for Palm Beach's social scene. Many of the town's elite became more guarded, wary of the potential scandals lurking behind closed doors. The age-gap relationships that had once been tacitly accepted became subject to greater scrutiny and gossip. Some older residents ruefully joked that Marilyn had ruined it for everyone, though the humor was decidedly dark. Jackson's death also sparked a broader conversation about the exploitation of young people in wealthy communities. Local colleges and universities implemented programs to educate students about the dangers of entering into relationships with significant power imbalances. The Palm Beach Police Department established a task force dedicated to investigating potential cases of financial exploitation and abuse in romantic relationships. The media frenzy surrounding the case eventually died down, but true crime enthusiasts continued to be fascinated by the case. books were written, documentaries were produced, and a high-profile Hollywood movie was even rumored to be in development, much to the chagrin of many Palm Beach residents who wished to put the whole sordid affair behind them. Marilyn's ex-husband, Harold Frost, found himself unwillingly thrust back into the spotlight. Though he had long since remarried and distanced himself from Marilyn, the case dredged up painful memories and forced him to confront the role he might have played in Marilyn's deteriorating mental state. In a rare interview given years after the trial, Harold expressed deep regret for not recognizing the signs of Marilyn's instability earlier and getting her the help she needed. Staff who had worked in Marilyn's household also grappled with the aftermath of the crime. Maria Gonzalez, the housekeeper who discovered Jackson's body, suffered from PTSD and required extensive therapy. She eventually wrote a memoir about her experiences, which provided a unique perspective on life in the Frost household and the events leading up to the murder. As for Marilyn herself, life in prison was a far cry from the luxury she had known. Initial reports suggested she was struggling to adapt, unable to cope with the loss of her freedom and status. However, as time passed, a different picture emerged. Some inmates reported that Marilyn had found a strange sort of peace behind bars, away from the pressures and expectations that had driven her to such extremes. Marilyn's children, who had been distant before the murder, were forced to confront their complicated feelings about their mother. Her daughter, Alexis, became an advocate for mental health awareness, using her family's tragic case to push for better support systems and intervention programs. Her son, Brandon, chose to distance himself entirely, legally changing his name and refusing all contact with Marilyn. The Breakers Palm Beach, where Marilyn and Jackson had first met, saw a temporary dip in business as the case unfolded. However, the historic resort's management handled the situation with grace, implementing new training programs for staff to recognize potential signs of exploitation or abuse among guests. Sophia, the young woman who had briefly captured Jackson's heart, found that moving on was harder than she had imagined. She was haunted by thoughts of what might have been, and by the guilt of wondering if she could have done something to prevent Jackson's death. In time, she channeled these feelings into her advocacy work, becoming a powerful voice for young people vulnerable to exploitation. The legal community in Palm Beach County also felt the ripple effects of the case. Prosecutor Vanessa Reeves' successful conviction of Marilyn Frost catapulted her career to new heights. She became a sought-after speaker on issues of domestic violence and financial exploitation, using the Frost case as a cautionary tale. Defense attorney Robert Shapiro, who had represented Marilyn, faced criticism for his aggressive tactics during the trial. However, he maintained that he had simply been doing his job to the best of his abilities, providing Marilyn with the robust defense to which she was entitled. As the years passed, the case began to take on an almost mythical quality in Palm Beach lore. Tour guides would point out Marilyn's former mansion on South Ocean Boulevard, weaving the tale of the crazy sugar mommy into their narratives of the town's history. Some locals complained about this ghoulish tourism, while others saw it as an inevitable part of Palm Beach's complex tapestry. The beach where Jackson had once worked as a lifeguard became an unofficial memorial site. Young people would sometimes leave flowers or small mementos, a tribute to a life cut tragically short. The city eventually installed a small plaque nearby, dedicated to all victims of domestic violence, a subtle acknowledgement of the tragedy that had unfolded in their community. In academic circles, the Frost case became a subject of study, analyzed by criminologists, psychologists, and sociologists. It was seen as a perfect storm of wealth, mental illness, and societal pressures, a cautionary tale of what can happen when unchecked privilege collides with untreated psychological issues. The fashion industry, which had once celebrated Marilyn as a style icon, quickly distanced itself. However, some edgier brands courted controversy by creating collections inspired by the case, walking a fine line between commentary and exploitation. In a strange twist of fate, the publicity surrounding the case led to renewed interest in Harold Frost's tech company. the stock price soared as investors, drawn by the notoriety, took a closer look at the firm's innovative product. Harold, conflicted about profiting from such a tragedy, pledged a significant portion of the proceeds to charities supporting victims of domestic violence. As Palm Beach approached the 10-year anniversary of Jackson's murder, the community found itself at a crossroads. Some wanted to use the occasion to launch new initiatives around mental health and relationship abuse. Others felt it was time to let the past rest, arguing that Palm Beach had dwelled on the tragedy for too long. In the end, compromise was reached. A small, dignified ceremony was held at the local community center, honoring Jackson's memory and reaffirming the town's commitment to preventing similar tragedies. Attendees included Jackson's family, Sophia, and several of Marilyn's former friends who had distanced themselves after the murder. The ceremony served as a moment of catharsis for many in the community. It allowed them to acknowledge the pain of the past while looking toward a more aware and compassionate future. Speakers emphasized the importance of reaching out to those who might be struggling, of recognizing the signs of abusive relationships, and of valuing human life above material wealth. As the sun set over the Atlantic that evening, casting a golden glow across Palm Beach's pristine beaches, there was a sense of a chapter closing. The case of Marilyn Frost and Jackson Torres would always be a part of the town's history. A dark reminder of the potential for tragedy lurks beneath even the most glittering surface. But there was also hope. Hope that from this tragedy, lessons had been learned and changes had been made. Hope that future generations would be more aware, more compassionate, and better equipped to prevent such a crime from happening again. So, Palm Beach continued on. Beaches still beautiful, its mansions still grand, social scene still vibrant. But beneath the surface, there was a new awareness, a deeper understanding of the complexities of human nature and the true cost of unchecked obsession. The case of the crazy sugar mommy had become more than just a sensational crime. It was a pivotal moment in Palm Beach's history, a catalyst for change, and a somber reminder that even in paradise, darkness can take root. It served as a testament to the resilience of the community, the enduring impact of a single life, and the ongoing struggle to balance wealth, power, and basic human decency in a world that often values appearance above all else. As night fell and the stars came out over Palm Beach, the town settled into an uneasy peace. The ghosts of the past might never fully be laid to rest, but the hope for a better future burned bright, a beacon guiding the way forward through the darkness of human nature and the unpredictable tides of fate. Thank you for watching until the end. I hope these stories brought you some thrilling and intense moments. If you enjoyed this content, be sure to hit like, share the video, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you never miss another unsolved mystery. Leave a comment below about which case intrigued you the most, and feel free to suggest any cases you'd like me to cover in the future. See you in the next video.